Billionaire pretends to be blind to test his son's fiancée. What happened next was unbelievable. The heavy steel door of the private safe swung open with a muted click. And in that exact second, everything in the room shifted. The soft clink of gold chains brushing against each other echoed louder than it should have, slicing through the quiet mansion hallway like a warning bell. Standing just a few feet away, an elderly man with dark glasses tilted his head slightly, his fingers tightening around the polished wooden cane in his hand. Though his eyes were hidden, nothing else about him seemed weak or unaware. This was Victor Hale, a self-made billionaire who had built empires by noticing what others missed, and today, he was watching without being seen. Across from the open safe stood Claire Morgan, the woman his son planned to marry. She smiled casually, her posture relaxed, her movements confident as she lifted a thick gold necklace from the velvet-lined shelf. The safe itself was massive, reinforced steel embedded into the wall, holding more wealth than most people would see in a lifetime cash stacks arranged with precision. Antique watches, rare coins, and layered jewelry that caught the light even in the dim room. Claire didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She examined each piece like someone who felt she belonged there. Victor shifted his weight, pretending to search the air with his cane, deliberately tapping it once against the marble floor. "Is everything all right, dear?" he asked calmly, his voice slow, measured, and aged just enough to sound fragile. "I can't see very well." "You know that." Claire turned toward him instantly, her smile widening, smooth and reassuring. "Yes, Mr. Hale, everything's fine," she replied sweetly. "I'm just organizing a few things for your son. He asked me to help prepare for the engagement dinner." From the doorway, the distant sound of footsteps echoed faintly, servants moving about. Unaware that something far more important than dinner preparations was unfolding behind these walls, Victor nodded as if satisfied, but behind the dark lenses of his glasses, his focus sharpened. Every sound, every pause in her voice, every movement of her hands told a story. And Victor Hale had spent his entire life reading stories written between the lines. What Claire didn't know, what no one in the house knew except Victor himself, was that he was not blind. Not now, not ever. The glasses, the cane, the slower steps were all part of a carefully crafted illusion, one he had introduced weeks earlier after meeting his son's fiancée for the first time. He had smiled then too, congratulated them, welcomed her warmly. But something had felt incomplete, too polished, too perfect. And Victor Hale had learned long ago that perfection often hid the sharpest edges. His son, Andrew Hale, trusted Claire completely. Andrew believed in people easily, a trait Victor both admired and feared. Andrew saw love as something simple and clean, untouched by calculations or motives. Victor knew better. He had watched partners, advisors, even family members change the moment wealth entered the room. Money didn't corrupt everyone, but it revealed them. That was why Victor had decided to test the one person who might one day stand beside his son, shaping his future and potentially inheriting the legacy Victor had built from nothing. He hadn't set traps or hired investigators. He hadn't planted fake scandals or whispered lies. Instead, he had chosen something far more effective: invisibility. People showed their true selves most clearly when they believed no one important was watching. Claire carefully placed the necklace back, then reached for a small velvet box containing a diamond bracelet. "Your safe is incredible," she said lightly, glancing in Victor's direction to check if he was paying attention. "You've collected some truly beautiful things over the years." Victor smiled faintly. "So I've been told," he replied. "Though these days I mostly rely on others to describe them to me." She laughed softly, a sound that carried warmth but also something rehearsed. "That must be hard," she said. "Losing your sight after such a full life." "Yes," Victor answered. "Hard in some ways, helpful in others." Claire didn't respond to that. Instead, She closed the bracelet box and held it for just a moment longer than necessary before placing it back inside the safe. The pause didn't escape Victor's notice. Neither did the way her fingers lingered over the stacks of cash, nor the subtle way her body angled itself between Victor and the open safe, as if shielding him from a view he supposedly didn't have. Minutes passed. The safe was closed. The door clicked shut. Claire turned, still smiling, and gently took Victor's arm. "Let me guide you back to the sitting room," she offered. "Andrew will be home soon." Victor allowed it, letting her lead him down the hallway, step by careful step. To anyone watching, it looked like kindness, consideration, respect, but Victor's mind was already working several moves ahead. This was only the beginning. One small moment in a much larger test. Because before the day was over, Claire Morgan would be faced with choices she didn't expect. And whether she realized it or not, every choice would be seen. The moment Victor Halle was settled back into his leather armchair in the sitting room, the house seemed to exhale. Soft classical music drifted from hidden speakers, and afternoon light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Claire adjusted the cushions behind Victor with practiced care, her touch gentle, almost affectionate. To anyone observing, she looked like the perfect future daughter-in-law, attentive, graceful, and considerate. Victor tilted his head slightly, listening. "Thank you, dear," he said quietly. "You're very kind to an old man." Claire smiled, though Victor couldn't see it, or rather, she believed he couldn't. "Of course, Mr. Halle. Andrew means everything to me. And you're his father." Those words landed softly, but Victor weighed them carefully. He had learned that people often spoke truths wrapped in exactly the words they wanted others to hear. He nodded slowly, his fingers resting loosely on the cane, his posture deliberately relaxed. "I worry sometimes," Victor continued, his voice carrying a hint of vulnerability. "Since my eyesight failed, I've had to trust others with things I once guarded myself. Documents, accounts, valuables." He paused just long enough to feel the silence stretch. "It's not easy letting go." Claire sat across from him, folding her legs neatly. "That must be difficult," she said again, echoing her earlier words. "But you've built such a strong family. Andrew is capable, loyal, you raised him well." Victor smiled faintly. "I did my best. Though loyalty is something time tests, not blood." Before Claire could respond, the front door opened. Andrew's voice echoed from the entryway, bright and energetic. "I'm home." Claire stood immediately. "He's back," she said cheerfully. "I'll get him." As her footsteps faded, Victor's expression shifted, only slightly, only for a moment. His smile disappeared, replaced by a thoughtful stillness. He leaned back and let his other senses sharpen. Sounds carried more weight when sight was removed, even artificially. He had noticed how Claire's tone changed, depending on who she spoke to. How her warmth increased when Andrew entered a room. How it cooled, subtly, when she thought herself unobserved. Andrew entered moments later, bending to kiss his father on the forehead. "Hey, Dad," he said warmly. "How was your afternoon?" "Quiet," Victor replied. "Your fiancée kept me company." Andrew laughed. "She's amazing, isn't she?" Victor turned his head toward his son's voice. "She is impressive," he said carefully. Claire returned with a tray of tea, placing it gently on the table. "I was just telling your father about the dinner arrangements," she said. "Everything's on schedule." Andrew beamed. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Victor listened to the way Claire laughed at that, soft, pleased, satisfied. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest, not of anger, but of caution. Love made people blind in ways no dark glasses ever could. As the afternoon wore on, Victor subtly steered the conversation. He mentioned an old business associate who had betrayed him years ago. He spoke about a cousin who vanished after a dispute over inheritance. Each story carried a quiet lesson. Each was followed by a pause and opening. Claire responded with sympathy every time, shock, disapproval of greed, praise for Victor's strength. She said all the right things, but Victor wasn't listening to what she said anymore. He was listening to when she spoke. How quickly, how carefully, how often she glanced at Andrew before answering, as if checking whether her response aligned with what he wanted to hear. Later, as evening settled in, Andrew stepped away to take a call. The room fell into a brief, heavy silence. Claire sipped her tea. Victor rested his hands together, cane balanced between his palms. "I forget things sometimes now," Victor said suddenly. "Being blind does that to you. You depend on reminders." He turned slightly toward her. "If something ever went missing, I might not even know." Claire's cup paused halfway to her lips. "I suppose that could happen," she said slowly. "But your staff seems trustworthy." "Yes," Victor agreed. "Trustworthy people reveal themselves when temptation appears." Another pause. Claire set her cup down carefully. "I should check on dinner," she said, standing a little too quickly. "Andrew will be hungry." Victor nodded. "Of course." As she walked away, Victor exhaled quietly. The test was no longer theoretical. The stage was set. And soon, Claire Morgan would be given an opportunity she hadn't asked for, but one that would define everything. That evening, the house settled into a calm that felt almost deliberate, as if the walls themselves were waiting. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, candles lit, silverware aligned with precision. Victor sat at the head of the table, his dark glasses reflecting the soft glow of the chandelier. Andrew and Claire sat beside each other, close enough that their shoulders occasionally brushed. To anyone watching, they looked like a perfect pair, young, confident, certain about the future they were building together. Victor listened. He listened to the rhythm of their voices, the pauses between bites, the way Claire laughed a second too late at Andrew's jokes, as if calculating whether they were funny enough to deserve it. He listened to how she spoke about their upcoming wedding, about the guest list, the venue, the flowers. She spoke with excitement, but also with ownership, as if the life they were planning already belonged to her. After dinner, Andrew excused himself again, called away by work. The sound of his footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving Victor and Claire alone once more. The servants cleared the table quietly, then disappeared, closing the doors behind them. The silence returned thick, deliberate, unavoidable. Victor tapped his cane lightly against the floor. "Claire," he said, his voice calm, almost weary, "would you mind helping me to my study?" "Of course," she replied instantly, standing and moving to his side. She offered her arm, and Victor took it, noting the firmness of her grip, confident, assured. As they walked, he spoke casually. "I spent most of my life afraid of losing control," he said. "Control of my company, my name, my legacy. Now that I can't see, it feels closer than ever." Claire nodded. "That's natural," she said. "But Andrew will protect everything you've built." "Yes," Victor agreed. "And so will the woman he marries." They reached the study. Victor gestured vaguely toward the desk. "Could you help me find a document? I think I left it in the safe." Claire hesitated only briefly. "The safe?" "Yes," Victor said, feigning uncertainty. "I can never remember the combination anymore. Numbers blur together in my head. I usually just leave it unlocked when I'm home." He allowed a small, embarrassed chuckle to escape him. Claire crossed the room. The safe stood partially hidden behind a painting, its heavy door slightly ajar. Inside, stacks of documents rested neatly alongside jewelry, watches, and thick envelopes. Even without seeing, Victor could imagine how it looked. He had arranged it that way himself. "I'll check," Claire said. "What are you looking for?" A folder marked Trust Amendments, Victor replied. Blue spine. It determines how the estate is divided. There it was. The temptation. Not rushed. Not forced. Placed gently in her hands. Victor heard the faint metallic sound as the safe door opened wider. He heard the soft rustle of paper. The barely audible clink of jewelry shifting. Each sound landed in his mind like a measured beat. It's quite full, Claire said lightly. So I'm told, Victor replied. Sometimes I worry I've made things too easy for the wrong people. Another pause. Victor shifted in his chair, turning slightly away, giving her the privacy she might believe she had. His face remained calm, expression neutral. He did not rush her. Tests, he knew, failed when pressure was applied too soon. Seconds passed. Then more. Finally, Claire spoke. I found the folder. Her voice was steady, but something had changed. A tightness, barely noticeable. Victor turned his head back toward her. Would you mind reading the first line? He asked. Just to be sure it's the right one, she inhaled softly. It says, in the event of my passing, all controlling interests shall, she stopped. Victor waited. Shall remain with Andrew Hawley, she finished. Until further review. Victor nodded. Thank you. She closed the folder. He heard it slide back into the safe. But then, another sound followed. A subtle one. The faint scrape of metal against metal. A movement that didn't belong to documents. Victor's grip on his cane tightened almost imperceptibly. Is everything all right? He asked gently. Yes, Claire replied quickly. I just bumped into something. Victor smiled. Clumsy safes. Always full of surprises. Claire laughed, but this time it came too quickly. As she helped him back to his chair, Victor's mind was already racing. He had not yet confirmed anything. But the test was deepening. And tomorrow, he would take it one step further, one that would leave no room for excuses, no place to hide. Because soon, Claire would believe she was completely unobserved. And that belief would decide everything. Morning arrived with a quiet precision that matched Victor Hale's intentions. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the mansion, warming the polished floors, illuminating portraits of past generations who had built their power on instinct as much as wealth. Victor sat alone in the breakfast room, his dark glasses on, his cane resting against the table, his posture relaxed but alert. To anyone watching, he was an aging man adapting to loss. In truth, every sound, every step, every hesitation in the house registered sharply in his mind. Claire entered exactly 3 minutes later than usual. Good morning, Victor, she said brightly. Too brightly. Good morning, my dear, Victor replied. Andrew already left for the office? Yes, she said. Early meeting. Victor nodded, though he knew Andrew's schedule well enough to recognize the lie. Andrew had told him the night before that he planned to work from home. Victor said nothing. Tests were useless if you revealed them too soon. As breakfast was served, Victor casually reached into his coat pocket and let a folded envelope slip onto the table. It landed with a soft thud. Claire's eyes flicked toward it before she could stop herself. Oh, did you drop something? She asked. Did I? Victor said mildly. My hands aren't what they used to be. Would you mind passing it back to me? Claire picked up the envelope. Victor heard the faint crackle of thick paper. He knew exactly what was inside unsigned documents, authorizing temporary access to one of his private offshore accounts. Worth millions. Useless without his signature. Dangerous in the wrong hands. This feels important, Claire said carefully. Everything feels important when you can't see, Victor replied. What does it say on the front? She hesitated. It's blank, Victor smiled. Then it must not matter. She handed it back, But Victor felt it, her reluctance, her curiosity, the calculation behind her calm exterior. He slipped the envelope back into his pocket, then leaned back slightly. "Claire," he said, "would you do me a favor today?" "Of course," she replied quickly. "I need to review some old files in the East Wing. The shelves are a mess. Years of paperwork. I don't trust the staff with it. Too many sensitive things. Would you help me organize them?" Her answer came without delay. "I'd be happy to." The East Wing study was a quiet place, rarely used. Its shelves lined with folders marked by dates, companies, investments. Victor sat near the window while Claire moved around the room, sorting, reading labels aloud when he asked. At first her behavior was flawless, attentive, respectful, helpful. Then Victor changed the rules. "On the third shelf," he said, gesturing vaguely, "there should be a black binder labeled Personal Holdings. Could you bring it here?" Claire climbed the small ladder, fingers brushing across spines. Victor listened to her breathing, steady but shallow. "I see it," she said. As she pulled it free, a loose envelope slipped out and fell to the floor. Victor heard it clearly. "Oh," Claire said. "Something fell." "Leave it," Victor said. "Just the binder." She paused. Victor waited. Seconds stretched. Then he heard it, the envelope being picked up. Paper sliding. A soft inhale. "Actually," Claire said, "it looks like it belongs inside." Victor turned his head slightly toward her voice. "Does it?" "Yes," she said. "It's marked. Emergency access." Victor nodded slowly. "Ah, that one. I forgot it was there." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Claire, if something happened to me, Andrew would be overwhelmed. That envelope ensures things continue smoothly. It's comforting to know someone trustworthy is nearby." The word hung between them. Trustworthy. Claire descended the ladder and approached him. Victor sensed her closeness, the careful control in her movements. "Do you want me to put it back?" she asked. Victor raised a hand, stopping her. "No, keep it with the binder. For now." Her fingers tightened on the leather cover. Victor could almost see the thoughts racing behind her eyes. That afternoon, Victor made his final move. He announced casually that he would be traveling the next day for a medical consultation out of state. "Andrew will stay," he said. "But I'll need someone here. Just in case." "I can stay," Claire said immediately. Victor smiled. That night, alone in his bedroom, Victor removed his glasses and stared out at the city lights beyond his window. Tomorrow, Claire would believe she had complete freedom, access, opportunity, and when people believed they were unobserved, they revealed who they truly were. The test was nearly over. The next morning unfolded exactly as Victor Hawley expected, quiet, orderly, and carefully staged. A car arrived at the front of the mansion to take him to the airport. Staff members moved efficiently, and Andrew stood by his father's side. Concern written plainly on his face. "Call me as soon as you land," Andrew said. "I will," Victor replied, resting a reassuring hand on his son's arm. His dark glasses hid the sharp awareness behind them. "Take care of things while I'm gone." Andrew nodded. "Claire will stay here. You won't have to worry." Victor turned slightly toward Claire's voice as she spoke. "I'll make sure everything is handled, Victor. Please focus on your health." Her tone was warm, perfectly measured. Victor smiled. "I trust you." The words were deliberate. They were the last piece of bait. The car pulled away, disappearing beyond the gates. But Victor did not go to the airport. Instead, the vehicle turned down a private service road and stopped at a smaller guest property hidden within the estate grounds one few people remembered existed. From there, Victor had full access to the house's security system, audio feeds, and motion sensors. Nothing invasive. Nothing illegal. Just enough to observe what happened when people believed they were alone. By midday, the mansion had settled into stillness. Claire moved freely now. No hesitation. No performance. She walked through rooms with purpose, heels clicking sharply against marble floors. She made phone calls Victor had never heard her make before, short, quiet ones. Names were spoken. Times discussed. Questions asked about documents and transfers. Then she went to the East Wing. Victor listened through the feed as the safe opened. Slowly, carefully, no fumbling this time. Claire knew exactly what she was doing. Papers were removed. Folders skimmed. The binder labeled Personal Holdings opened. A long silence followed. Victor's jaw tightened. Claire spoke aloud to herself softly, as if testing the words. So this is how it's structured. She removed the envelope marked Emergency Access. Victor exhaled slowly. There it was. She did not rush. She photographed documents. She read details carefully. She replaced some papers, but not all. When she closed the safe, Victor already knew what had been taken. An hour later, Andrew returned home unexpectedly. Claire froze when she heard the door. Her voice, when she greeted him, was flawless, light, loving. She explained she had been organizing things for Victor, wanting to be helpful. Andrew kissed her cheek, none the wiser. But the real reveal came that evening. Andrew sat with Claire in the living room, discussing wedding plans again. She steered the conversation subtly toward finances, toward Victor's condition, toward how uncertain the future felt. What if something happens to your father suddenly? She asked gently. Wouldn't it be safer if we were prepared? Andrew frowned. Prepared how? Well, she said carefully, some people move assets early. For stability. For the family. Andrew shook his head. Dad wouldn't want that. Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That night, Victor made his call. Andrew, he said, his voice steady, my appointment was moved. I'll be back first thing in the morning. Andrew sounded relieved. That's great news. Yes, Victor replied. It is. The trap was closed. Claire had revealed enough. Not everything, but enough. Enough to understand her priorities. Enough to know that love, for her, had conditions. By dawn, Victor was back at the mansion. When he entered the living room without his cane, without his glasses, Claire's smile faltered. And for the first time since she arrived in that house, she realized she had never truly been unseen. Victor Halle stood still in the center of the living room. The polished marble floor cool beneath his feet. The vast space suddenly feeling much smaller than it ever had before. The cane he had relied on for months rested against the wall, untouched. The dark glasses, symbols of weakness, limitation, dependency, were folded neatly in his hand. His eyes, sharp and observant, moved calmly from his son to the woman who had believed him powerless. Andrew felt his chest tighten. His mind raced back through every moment of the past months. The lowered voice Claire used around his father, the exaggerated kindness, the way she guided Victor's hand or spoke a little louder than necessary. All of it reassembled itself now into a picture he hadn't wanted to see. You planned all of this, Andrew said quietly. It wasn't an accusation. It was realization. Victor nodded once. I planned the opportunity, not the outcome. Claire took a step back, shaking her head as if denial alone could undo what had been revealed. This is insane, she said, forcing a thin laugh. You invaded my privacy. You manipulated everyone. Victor's voice remained even. I removed my advantage. That's all. I gave you power you didn't earn and watched what you did with it. Andrew turned to her. You told me you were organizing files for Dad. You told me you were helping. I was helping, Claire said quickly. I wanted to be prepared. What if something happened to him? Everything would fall on us. Victor raised his hand slightly. Prepared people ask questions. They don't take photographs. The words landed hard. Andrew felt something fracture inside him, not all at once, but slowly, painfully. Did you ever love me? He asked. Claire hesitated. That hesitation answered more than words ever could. Victor stepped forward, his presence filling the room. Claire, I've watched powerful men lose everything because they trusted charm over character. I promised myself my son would not be one of them. She swallowed. You judged me without knowing my life. I judged your choices, Victor replied. Those speak louder than stories. He pressed another button on the remote. This time, no footage played. Instead, financial records appeared clean, clear, undeniable. Access attempts. Time stamps. Copies of documents that never should have left the safe. Andrew closed his eyes. I never signed anything, Victor continued. Nothing you took could be used. That was intentional. But your willingness to take it, that's what mattered. Claire's voice broke. I was scared of being powerless. Victor nodded slowly. Fear doesn't excuse betrayal. Security entered quietly, respectfully, standing at a distance. There was no need for force. The truth had already done the work. Claire, Victor said, you will leave this house today. You will return every copy you made. If you do that, this ends quietly. Andrew finally spoke again. Please just go. She looked at him one last time, searching for something: pity, forgiveness, regret. She found resolve instead. When the door closed behind her, the silence felt heavy but clean. Andrew sank into a chair, hands covering his face. I feel like an idiot. Victor sat across from him. You trusted someone you loved. That's not stupidity. That's humanity. Andrew looked up. What if I hadn't seen this? What if you'd really been blind? Victor leaned forward. Then she would have taken more. And you would have learned the truth far later, at a far greater cost. Hours passed as they talked about trust, about power, about how easily kindness could be mistaken for weakness. Victor told Andrew about his early years, about people who smiled while stealing from him, about the mistakes that shaped his caution. Days later, Victor addressed his household staff. He apologized for the deception, not for the test, but for the confusion it caused. He rewarded loyalty quietly, without speeches. The estate plans were rewritten with transparency. Andrew was included in every decision. No secrets. No shadows. Victor stopped pretending to be blind, but he never stopped watching, because the greatest lesson he learned wasn't about Claire. It was this. People reveal their true nature not when they are watched, but when they believe they are not. And that knowledge, once gained, is worth more than any fortune.